the Joan Quinn Profiles. As an editor for Andy Warhol's Interview, the Los Angeles Herald-Examiner, LA Style, and Detour magazines, Joan covered the social set, the Hollywood hotshots, the international art scene, the mysteries of food, the excitement of travel, and the fabulous world of fashion. Joan continues to find creative people on the cutting edge who make things happen. Here's Joan Quinn.
Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and welcome to the Joan Quinn Profiles. Waiting to be profiled is singer Chris Bennett and author Aris Janigian. Singer Chris Bennett was born and raised in Illinois. But is it true, Chris, that when you were still in high school, you had your own dance studio?
Yes, I did, Joan. I've always wanted to be a singer, dancer, actress, and my dance teacher went away to college, and I took over her dance studio when I was 12 years old. So. Yeah, it was a little town, but I would say I wanted some money so I could buy a horse. So.
And you could actually teach and do all that?
I've been teaching dance since I was 8 years old, believe it or not.
Really?
I just love to teach, and I mean as an assistant, and then they started paying me for it when I was 12.
When you went to the University of Illinois, you did major then in music and no, you majored in dance and minored in music.
I was a dance major and a music minor and did a lot of Broadway musicals there. And
University did you? Were you going to dance? Is that what you wanted to do?
I was born too late. I wanted to be Sid Charisse. But I wish I had been born
Your legs are as long.
Thank you. So now I'm a yoga teacher. But yes, dance was my first love. I started when I was 3 years old. And I think I always had an idea that I would be a dancer someday. But by the time I got there really wasn't much of a career for dancers. And by then I had discovered singing and writing, and so I still take dance classes every week, and I also teach yoga, so I've gotten to do something with the movement.
Did you work teaching dance when you were at grad school at UCLA, or?
No, I came out here, I graduated from University of Illinois, and I knew I either wanted to go to LA or New York, and I was accepted at UCLA
Right.
and NYU, and maybe I should have gone to New York, but would have probably chewed me up. I was from Illinois, and I was pretty green, so I loved that I came to LA, and I went to graduate school, but I started going out on auditions, and I got picked as a background singer and dancer for Jim Neighbors, Gomer Pyle, and I thought I had arrived.
Was that for TV?
No, his TV show had just finished, but he was still very popular, and he was playing Harrah's and Reno and Tahoe and touring the country, and he always took a group of 10 young people, the neighbors' kids, and it was just a great entrance into showbiz for me, and I got to dance with Gomer, and we opened the show for him, and it was just a wonderful experience.
And you also worked with Dean Martin.
Yes, right after that, then I was here, and I wasn't one of the gold diggers, but you know, he'd always have girls either in.
But was that on TV?
Oh yeah, I was
TV.
doing acting sketches with Bob Newhart, and it was a wonderful time. I'm a huge fan of Dean Martin.
That was great.
What a great man he was.
So you traveled the world singing. You started.
That's right. It has taken me around the world. Right after that, my manager said, "Hey, do you want to put a nightclub act together and go to Bangkok, Bali, and Tokyo?" And I said, "You bet." So
why would they think of that at that time?
You know, he just knew a guy who was booking talent in the big nightclubs over there, and you know, they wanted Americans, and I put my act together, and away I went. And while I was over there, I met this German production company, and they cast me in their film, and so I
you were in the Far East?
In Bangkok, believe it or not, and then I ended up just falling in love with the whole thing and moving to Germany, and I learned to speak German, and then my career as an actress took off in Germany for a few years.
Is that right? So where were you living in Germany?
Berlin partly and Munich partly. Yeah.
Really?
It's a great time.
And
that's where
were
I
you
met.
Singing?
Yes, I was. I was really kind of focusing on acting, wanting to get into singing, and I stumbled into Giorgio Moroder, who the famed disco Donna Summer, et cetera, et cetera. A friend of mine said, "Hey, we've just signed this guy who has a record company," and it was just as he had released "Love to Love You, Baby," which was really the first big disco 12-minute dance piece.
Biggest.
And he signed me as a singer, and I released my first single, "Disco Man," which hopefully no one's ever heard.
So Giorgio was in Munich?
He was in Munich at the time, and his career was just starting to blossom with Donna Summer and Casablanca Records.
And he called it Munich Machine?
Yes, and then so he...
But he's Italian.
He called the group Munich Machine. So mine was Munich Machine featuring Chris Bennett, and it did very well in like the gay discos around the world, and then I got to write the music for Midnight Express with him. You know, he did really the first synthesizer film score. And of course, he won the Academy Award for it.
I was going to ask you about that because you were part of that Academy Award.
Well, I co-wrote the theme song, so we were nominated for a Grammy. John Williams beat us, darn it. But it was sure fun to be nominated, and that opened a lot of doors.
But that must have been the most exciting thing.
Very exciting time.
And how'd you collaborate with someone like, he was more of a producer, wasn't he?
Yes, Giorgio.
And you wrote.
Giorgio was a producer. Now I write mostly music. In those days I was writing lyrics, and it would be really, he'd come into town. I was back and forth between LA and Germany, and he said, oh, there's this film about a guy smuggling drugs and I need some lyrics, and he gave me this track, and I had to sit down that night and write the lyrics. And
there were lyrics to that then. I thought it was all music.
They're on the soundtrack album. This has the lyrics to the theme from Midnight Express.
And then the theme with the movie? Are there words?
They didn't use it in the movie.
I see.
I've never forgiven Oliver Stone for that.
I see.
No, I'm teasing Oliver.
But yeah, don't say anything.
I'll write your next one if you want me.
But then you've written songs for Tina Turner and a lot of people.
Transfer, Keb Mo. Yes, my career as a writer really blossomed after that time, and I had a wonderful time in Germany, but I missed the good old USA, and I ended up moving back here and continuing my career.
You were just writing songs and they were recording them, you weren't singing them, you weren't doing acts with them?
Well, I was the lead singer for Munich Machine for the first album, and then I didn't really want to do that anymore because I really wanted to sing jazz, but disco was big and Giorgio wanted me, and so I was just wanting to get into the business.
Keb Mo won a Grammy.
Yes.
And you produced one of his albums.
I discovered Keb Mo in 1980 when he was Kevin Moore, and he would change his name a little bit, and he was singing mostly pop R&B, but it was obvious he was a huge talent, and so I went in and got him a big record deal at Casablanca Records and produced it, and then remember Neil Bogart died and Casablanca went under and Kevin's album went under, and he wasn't heard from again for about 10 years, and then now he has, of course, surfaced again as Keb Mo, and he's won 2 Grammys, and I'm just so proud of him.
But have you worked with him recently?
Oh, yeah, we work together all the time. In fact, he's going to be working with me on my next album, and I'm producing a blues album on a gentleman called Lunch Meat.
Oh, you really?
Yes, he was.
You've moved right along from Munich Machine.
That's right. Now I'm doing blues and rock and roll and jazz. Yeah, he was Kevin's first keyboard player when they had a band in the 80s, and so now I'm producing him, and Kevin came in and played guitar for me.
Well, what happens when you produce? I mean, do you have to take another hat?
You get to boss everybody around. I love it.
Do you know what you're doing rather than actually performing?
It's totally different. I like to organize, and I don't have children of my own, but I love to baby my artists, and it's just really, I get to sit back and really listen and guide people. I mean, obviously I like to work with very talented, interesting artists. I wouldn't like it if it was somebody they gave me that didn't have any talent, but it's really a satisfying way to work, and a lot of times they'll sing my music, or sometimes I just sit back and say, you know, could you sing that again? That was a little out of tune, or whatever.
And do they have a say in producing the record?
It depends. I mean, I'm working with a young 17-year-old artist who'd never been in a studio before, so she was just kind of like, what do I do? But, you know, if you're working with a more seasoned artist, I don't try to bully them or anything. You want to provide a really relaxed atmosphere, have the best musicians, the best engineers, so that you get the best performance out of them.
When you're writing, do you always write with a partner?
Usually. I have written a few songs by myself, but I'm a big believer in collaboration. I don't consider myself a great lyricist. I really like to work with people who are poets.
I thought it was interesting that you work with women writers.
You know, they write the words I want to sing. I don't know if, I mean, there are obviously great male lyricists, but on the whole, they give you the lyrics that the way a woman talks and thinks.
You have the feeling.
Yeah.
Well, you've made a lot of CDs.
Yes, those are all
I want to just show them, just to go through.
Okay.
And this one is...
That one's Live in Berlin. That's one of the most fun ones because it was recorded live at a concert I did in Berlin, Germany at the A-Train, a very cool jazz club.
A-T-R-A-N-E.
Exactly, like Coltrane, with some of Germany's best musicians and my Tahitian sax player.
And this
That's
one?
my first independent album, Chris Bennett, and it has some great versions of Bus Stop and Funny Valentine, and that was when I first jumped out there as an independent artist in jazz.
And this I love
Thank
this.
you. That's the most romantic album, Less is More, and we just picked the most romantic songs, and there's a little bit of violin, a little bit of guitar, very, very bare bones arrangements on that one.
They're all by someone else. You didn't write these songs.
Yeah.
Oh, you wrote them too.
I usually write about half the songs, so that there's a few standards that people love, and then I get to put my originals out there too.
I see.
This is the brand new one. This is all Latin, a lot of samba and salsa, and using a lot of Puerto Rican horn players and Brazilian guitarists.
And I heard that, and I also, knowing your dance background, can see you dancing around the stage.
Yeah, you got a boogie on that one.
You live in Venice, California, on the canals.
Right on the canals. I'm a lucky girl.
You have a healthy lifestyle?
Yes, I do. I'm also a yoga teacher, and I always, having been a dancer and loving movement, and about 15, 20 years ago, I stumbled into a yoga class and just fell in love with it.
Down by the beach?
Yeah,
you go to the beach?
It was at a health club.
Where do you teach?
I teach at the Sports Club LA and the Howard Hughes Spectrum, a little bit privately. And the last 2 years I've taken 30 people to Maui for a yoga retreat for a week, and where you get healthy and do a couple of hours of yoga a day.
How much training did you do for that?
You know, well, of course, I'd been a dancer all my life, and then I apprenticed with this wonderful teacher, just taking 4 or 5 classes a week for about 10 years. And then she moved north and said, why don't you teach a little bit? And since I'd always been a teacher, I just kind of stumbled into it, and I absolutely love it, and I see the benefits. I had a 90-year-old woman come into my class a few weeks ago, and she could do the plow. That's the one where you put your feet over your head. And
because she'd been doing it so long?
She started in her 70s, but at 90,
20 years.
But at 90, she was very flexible. So it's really encouraging to see that you can stay healthy and flexible all your life.
And I think something came out of that, Yoga Kids.
Yes, I got to combine my music and my yoga. One of my girlfriends did a video for children's yoga, and I got to write all the songs and music for her. And we're getting ready to do another one, yeah.
And because you perform, you're performing at the Casa.
I'm performing at Casa del Mar. It's a beautiful hotel right on the beach, right at the end of Pico in the ocean.
Do you accompany yourself?
Yes, I'm a pianist too.
Oh, you are too. So
played piano since I was 5 years old. I will have a piano player too. I like to be at the piano about half the time, and then some. You know, I think
do you get up?
Then
and
I get up
around?
and move around and have another piano player as well.
Do you interact with the crowd?
Oh, sure.
Of course you do.
Of course I do. I think I love everything I do with music, but performing live's the best.
I think that you have given us such a rundown today.
I'm a busy girl, Joan.
It all. Yes, you are.
Thank you.
Do you plan to travel more around the world, or?
I do. I mean, I love being home I have a home studio, and I have animals and a husband and a great life. So I love to travel. Every summer I go to Berlin and do some big festivals.
Oh,
and
you do?
I'm actually doing 3 concerts in Tahiti at the end of the month. It's a rough life.
Oh, that's great. But especially when you love to sing.
I just love it. And I perform in LA as much as I can if they've got a good piano. I like a nice piano that's tuned.
You'll be there.
I'll be there then.
And we'll be there to watch you.
Great, John.
Thank you, Chris Bennett. Very
much. Thank you, John. It's always a pleasure.
And don't go away, because we'll be back with Aris Janigian and his Bloodvine novel. Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and welcome back. I'm with author Aris Janigian, who was born and raised in Fresno, California. He attended Westmont College in Santa Barbara and the Claremont Graduate University. Aris is a second-generation Armenian American, and I don't know why I'm saying that. It was on your PR. It was on your PR form for Bloodvine. What does that mean?
Well, I guess technically it means that my dad was born here, and so I'm the second generation Armenian born in America. Though my mom was an immigrant from Alexandria, Egypt.
Oh, she was.
Yes.
So how was it to live in Fresno, where they say it's the largest Armenian population in the state?
Well, when I was there, it was large but fairly ghettoized as well. The Armenians were kind of shoved into one part of town, and now it's known as Armenian Town. But
Where they were shoved?
Yes, but back then it was the only place they could really live outside of the country. And it was a wonderful, very rich place with a mix of ages, from old ladies who are genocide survivors, kept neat little gardens, and young and old alike. It was a very beautiful and rich place at that time.
I think the reason I'm asking you is because your novel, Bloodvine, which is your first novel,
Yes.
really expands on everything you just said. And usually when you talk to an author, they've written or they draw from other things. I see so strongly that you've drawn from just what you've said.
Yes.
Did you grow grapes?
No, my dad was a farmer, as was his father.
Mm-hmm.
I left Fresno when I was 19. Wasn't much interest in agriculture. So I left that world behind, though after my father died, I came back and I picked up an aspect of it, which is I more or less broker wine grapes.
Because you grow and then give to other
Well,
wineries.
we don't grow.
But
I'm not a farmer.
people
That's
grow
right.
and give to other wine.
That's right.
So
You
what
buy
was
and sell
that?
the grapes.
Packing and shipping?
Yeah, what I do is I put
You
grapes.
still do?
Yeah, I put grapes in boxes, and we ship them off to home winemakers.
Oh, to home winemakers.
Yep.
So is it a different quality of grape?
No, it's the same grape. It's just packaged so that people could pick up cases of it and mix and match and make their own kind of wine.
Oh, that's interesting. What other crops were prevalent during the time when your father was farming, say?
Well, there were a lot of melons, and the valley really anything grows there with the right irrigation and the right kind of soil.
So Fresno's right in the middle of the state.
Right in the middle of the state, yes. It's the breadbasket of this state.
So you didn't have to do with any of the other crops. You wouldn't box any of the, pack them or ship those.
No, my father was a farmer and grew many types of produce, but we lived in the city. And so he would keep us somewhat away from the farm for reasons I was never quite able to
You
understand.
didn't farm then?
No, I never farmed.
But usually farmers take their whole
Yes, they do.
kids with
and my
them.
dad didn't. He kept us ensconced in the city, and he would drive his truck out to the farm and do his work and come back in the evening.
Do you think that was part of the immigrant mentality, to have your family integrate and not be something that came from, say, the old country?
Well, I don't know. There's a lot of farmers, Armenian farmers, who settled in the valley in the teens and 20s through 50s, and they kept their family on the farm, and there were some that did just that. They moved back and forth between the city and the farm.
Did you want to write at that time? You weren't farming, so
Yeah.
did you want to
Well, I was
write?
a kid still, and I'm not sure I knew anything besides, girls and whatever else there was to know at the time.
But was it a given that you go to college?
Oh, yes. Yes.
That was. You
Yes.
wanted-
I had to go to college, and I
And
had
were you
to learn
going
a
to
living.
were you going to be a professional person when you went to college?
Well, I knew I had to earn a living, but I also had a passion for the arts
Oh, you did?
and writing.
Oh.
So I kind of pursued a dual track, vocational track. One was towards an academic, straight line academic career. I did my PhD in psychology, and parallel to that, I wrote.
I see. So I can see also the psychology part of it coming out in the novel. You teach now at Southern California Institute of Architecture.
Yes.
SciArc.
Yes.
And what do you teach?
I teach philosophy. Philosophy of design, but then straight ahead philosophy, all the way from the Greeks through to the Middle Ages.
Oh, so that is important for architects.
Well, yes, because architects, like any other artists, a lot of their work is informed by
Yes.
broader theories.
So is it a requisite course there?
Yes, I teach one requisite course in Greek through medieval philosophy, and then I teach electives as well.
Oh, very interesting. So then, while you were teaching, did Bloodvine come along during that time? How long did it take you to write it?
Bloodvine, it came along, I wrote it in 1 year. I was 36, between the age of 36 and 37, I completed it. And I was teaching at the same time, but I had been writing all along.
So, were you keeping a diary? Because I'm sure this is based on fact.
I never kept a diary. For the book I interviewed, the book is roughly based upon an episode of my father's life, which amounts to a kind of betrayal by his brother over their inheritance. But I never kept a diary. I did some research with relatives, interviewing them. But it is a book of fiction. I mean, it is a book of imagination.
Did you put a lot of your imagination into it?
A lot.
I loved the book. It read really fast and really interesting, and I think the idea of, for want of a better word, superstition, voodoo, those kind of things seem to be so prevalent in certain types of people.
Yes, well, the Armenian culture, though it's the oldest Christian nation, 1,700 years
That's
of Christianity.
That's why it's so surprising.
But there is a very strong pagan element to Armenian culture, and it's kind of an undercurrent that runs through it, parallel to the church, and those things pop up through the novel.
I saw that, and they're strong.
Yeah.
And I think when you talk to families, they do have those kind of strong evil eye, to keep away the evil eye, which seems so Mediterranean to me, and yet it seems to be coming closer and closer to paralleling with the church.
That's right. I think the church quietly kept away from it. At some points, it also intersected. I was in Armenia a few years back, and I was surprised to see that in the back of the churches, they actually had sacrifice tables where people would bring live animals.
Yes, in current day?
Current day, yes, to be sacrificed, which is something you would never see that in America.
No, that's interesting. This book is published by Heyday Books, which I found pretty interesting because they publish books having to do with the state of California.
Yes, that's right.
Tell us a little bit about Heyday and how you got to them.
Well, Heyday is devoted, I think it may be the only press to be devoted to books on California. And they do a lot of Native American literature, Native American history, Japanese American. They have partnerships with universities for a California poetry series.
But they have to be in the state.
Yeah,
the
it's
Japanese Americans, the Indian,
the California experience.
I see.
And
I see.
And for that reason, I was very eager to publish this book with them, because I feel that we are underrepresented as a literary tradition in the state, and there's so much.
I mean, the Armenian people.
Well, no, the California literature.
Oh, the California literature. Yes, I think that's probably true.
And yet it's a very strong literary tradition, especially in the Central Valley. And so I thought Heyday would be a perfect publisher for this book.
How'd you know about them?
Well, I found out through them through a cousin of mine, Mark Arax.
Oh, I see.
And he's
a journalist.
He's a journalist for the Los Angeles Times. And he'd had some commerce with a publisher, Malcolm Margolin, and he introduced me to him.
I see, because it's so specific, and it's so perfect for your book that I wondered how you paired. Have you thought about making a movie out of this?
Well, it'd be wonderful. I certainly wouldn't turn any offers down.
You haven't written a screenplay or anything, have you?
No. I've had a couple people approach me, and you know, as things unfold, we'll go. But I haven't written a screenplay out of it. I'm working on a second novel.
Are you? That's what I was going to ask you. And is it a continuation of this?
Not really. It's about this book is about half brothers, and the book I'm writing now is about brothers, twins, and some of the same struggles that we find in Bloodvine, I'm working out in this book. But it's a completely different setting and different tone to the writing. It's a first-person narrative, while Bloodvine is a third-person narrative.
Is it Armenian-based?
Yes, it is. the brothers are twin brothers, born in Fresno, Armenian.
Do you go back to Fresno?
Well, I go back there to do the harvest.
Oh,
the grape
you
harvest,
still do, right?
So I'm there a good 2-3 months out of the year.
Are you a cook?
I love cooking, yeah.
Oh, tell us what you cook.
Well, unfortunately, I don't cook much Armenian food.
Oh, well, that's no good. I just wanted to know about the Armenian food because I think you mention it in the book, and you have such a way of describing things that you bring it to light.
Yeah, well, I love to describe food. I think it's really a gas to try to sit down and to describe a meal. In this, there's a big description of a Thanksgiving meal here.
That's what I was thinking about.
And try to give the sense of the texture of the food and the amount of it on an Armenian Thanksgiving table, and the joy of it. So I really enjoy describing food.
I think that really came about, and that part of it, what you're talking about now, and the negative part of it just is like loggerheads.
Yes.
It really makes each part of them stronger
because
they're so intense. The complaints of one of the brothers' wives is just always naggy compared to all this lushness that you have.
And I think that's much characterizes Armenian culture.
Which I'm finding more and more now.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, there is on the one hand this very fertile, as you say, lush, generous, charitable side to the culture, singing and dancing. And on the other hand, there's, and this is true of all ethnic cultures, there's a degree of shame and an internalized anger, largely for the Armenians because of the genocide. And I think those two temperaments do collide in the book in ways that makes you both tugged on one hand and tugged on the other hand.
I felt that so much, and I also felt that everything that was wrong, that all you could hear your family saying is, our family would never do that.
Yeah.
We would never do that kind of thing. And yet here it is, the same family that's saying we would never do that as a part of this horrible thing.
Yeah, and I think that as I have more and more feedback on the book, this kind of betrayal within families is so common.
I know.
And especially where land is involved.
Money.
Land and money. But the old-fashioned form of money was land.
Right.
And it's really a Cain and Abel story.
It really is, and I'm so glad that you came to talk about it today.
Thank you, Joan. It
Thanks,
was a delightful.
Aris Janigian, and thank you for watching the show today. Keep writing to 777 South Figueroa, 44th floor, Los Angeles 917. We'll see you next time. Bye.